What a week here in the Circle City, and that includes the Colts. It'll be a busy week here as we reach the end of May. I'm Kevin Bone. We're back. Another edition of Kevin's Corner. For us in Central Indiana, it's all about Pacers and Racers this time of year. But the Colts, again, will pick up some steam with their OTAs getting started this week. Anthony Richardson's first 11-on-11 work is expected to take place since last October. In today's podcast, we'll focus on that. We'll play an interview with his private quarterback coach, Will Hewlett, coming up here in a few minutes, and also get some thoughts on the schedule release that we saw late last week. Eddie Garrison, quite the time here to be in Central Indiana.
That is correct. What a weekend. The Indiana Pacers, Scott McLaughlin breaking the record for the fastest pull. And just want to preface this now. In the studio, our fire alarm is going off.
Yeah.
There is no fire. We've been alerted that it's a false alarm. So if you pick up any like blinking sounds like of a light or any humming, just know it's from that. And just want to assure everybody, there is no fire. Kevin didn't set any fires off coming back from Las Vegas.
No. Thankfully, I did not. Or burn a fire, burn a hole, I should say, in my pocket based off losing all my winnings there. So it was a great time in Vegas, and boy, what a Sunday here in Indianapolis. Again, Pacers win Game 7. Great drama, as always, for Qualls and bump day over there at IMS. And I'm excited about the Colts. I'm excited to talk about the schedule and looking forward to OTAs. Again, we'll just watch one session coming up on Wednesday. Recap that next week on the pod, but we might push the pod a little bit back deeper next week to kind of get the reactions from OTA viewings. But nonetheless, Eddie Garrison, here we are, reaching the end of the Colts offseason program. And again, Anthony Richardson, the expectation is his first 11-on-11 work. I do want to kind of start with a little bit of a Pacers analogy with football.
All right, let's hear it.
To lead off the pod here. And, obviously a lot of people have mentioned the, Knicks are incredibly banged up, and that's the only reason why the Pacers are advancing, et cetera, et cetera. There's times that obviously injuries occur. Certainly you don't need to remind Pacers fans here in recent history of injuries occurring for their team. And, it's one thing for that to happen, but it's another thing to take advantage of that, or I think maybe expose the injury situation for a given team and maybe the lack of depth or the lack of experience that now is being thrust into that position. And I think that is the aspect to what the Pacers just did in 7 games that's not being talked about enough. Yes, the Knicks were missing a multitude of very quality basketball players, but the Pacers had a very concerted effort to say, oh, you've got the backup left tackle in the game? Well, let me move my dominant pass rusher across your backup left tackle. Oh, you're starting a rookie quarterback this afternoon? Well, let me make sure that he sees a few exotic looks that maybe we didn't show on film here in recent weeks. And I think that's what you're seeing, or that's what you saw, I should say, from the Pacers in that 7-game series. We're going to pick up full court, not something that the Pacers typically do. We're going to be super reliant on our depth and play our bench a good amount. The Pacers have to be playing their bench more than any other team in the league right now in the postseason. And, the ball movement offensively has really been a staple all season long, but let's make them guard deep into a possession and, really kind of wear them out. And frankly, when, teams have had to go to the bench here in this series, the Pacers bring quality off the bench, and the Knicks brought liability off the bench more often than not. So I do think that's an aspect to this series that probably wasn't talked about enough. And again, bring it into football terms, when Blake Freeland was starting for Braden Smith, teams attacked that, as they should. And when you're facing, backup rookie quarterbacks, which the Colts will see a few rookies this season on the schedule, it's important to try and expose that. So major credit to Rick Carlisle and company for getting the Pacers back to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in a decade.
Let's jump into the Colts schedule. They only have 3 games, if you include the preseason, as of right now, that are not kicked off at 1 o'clock. The 3 preseason games, 2 of them at home. They are the first 2 preseason games. August 11th against the Broncos. Very odd to see the Colts also play them later in the regular season. That is week number 1 in the preseason. Week number 2 against Arizona on August the 17th. That is a Saturday. And then the final preseason game 5 days after that on Thursday, August 22nd at Cincinnati against the Bengals. That's 1 of 3 games, not at 1 o'clock. That's an 8 o'clock kick, and that will be on Prime Video. Anything to add here about the preseason schedule?
I think some joint practices will be with Arizona, potentially maybe even down in Cincinnati for that final one. So just keep an eye out on that. And, we should get a training camp schedule here at some point. I would just say overall schedule thoughts, Eddie. I would start here. Get used to Sundays at 1 o'clock. It's the first 10 weeks of the year.
Correct.
You are Sunday at 1 o'clock. I guess for our out-of-town audience, it's great news to see no streaming necessary, if that is an issue for you. So you're going to be on the CBS or Fox or NBC platforms. Of course, just one primetime game with the Jets. That is Sunday Night Football. And the only 425er is Denver late in the season. You don't have that Thursday night game for a second straight year. And you do have the latest bye week in the NFL. I know I think some in the NFL have actually said, the late bye week hasn't been the end of the world for some teams. Ideally, you'd have it more in the middle of the season, especially when you don't have the mini bye. I think there are a few teams that have made deep playoff runs lately that have had the late bye week. For what it's worth, the Colts and the Texans both have that late bye week. So that week 14 bye. So that's what stands out to me. I would say my overall thoughts is this. It is wildly quarterback front-loaded. That was my biggest takeaway from the schedule. If you are going to rank the quarterbacks you face early in the season compared to late, and you were to rank the, 18 or 17 quarterbacks that you face, I would say of the 10 names on that list, you probably see 9 of them certainly before Thanksgiving, maybe even before Halloween. To read that off for you in scheduling terms.
Hell, you see 5 of them in a 6-week stretch.
Yeah. And again, there are a couple thrown in there that are not, great quarterbacks, but still, this is your quarterback schedule to start the year. C.J. Stroud, Jordan Love, Caleb Williams, Russell Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Will Levis, Tua Tagovailoa, C.J. Stroud again, J.J. McCarthy, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff. Now, if that doesn't sound like a murderer's row, and again, I know there are some QBs in there that are not at that elite level by any means, let's put it into perspective by comparing it to the end of the year. The end of the year, Eddie, Drake May, Bo Nix, Will Levis, Daniel Jones, Trevor Lawrence.
Hell yeah. Hail to the yeah.
Thought I saw a note that the Colts had the easiest schedule on paper, weeks 13 to 18. Now, there are a few outdoor weather games that could be inclement. If you look at a trip to Foxborough December 1st, trip to Denver the 15th of December, and then a trip to New York, MetLife, there to close out the month. I tend to think, though, the Colts are a little bit better equipped to be outdoors than most dome teams, quote-unquote, there. But, again, it's the quarterback nature to the schedule and just the stark contrast in the, first half, maybe more like 2/3 of the schedule versus the last third of it. That is what really stood out to me.
How about the Colts getting another home game on the week of Thanksgiving against the team that notoriously does play on Thanksgiving? That is Detroit, correct?
I thought,
or is that the week before?
I think it might be the week prior. Isn't it a late Thanksgiving this year?
I guess I should have checked that out before I spoke. So
yeah, no. It's
28th.
So I guess the Lions will then be playing on a short week after that.
An uber short week for them.
Yeah, Colts Lions on the 24th.
Back-to-back years, no Thursday night football.
Yeah, and that's.
I wonder when the last time that happened.
Right. So that is something that definitely, stands out there. Anything else jump out at you? I just had a couple other notes. Texans, both those games before Halloween.
Neither on primetime either.
Neither of them on primetime. You have all your divisional road games done by Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
You don't typically see that. And you brought this up, I think, earlier. You have that stretch in there. It's probably the toughest stretch of the season, the 4 of 5 on the road. The one home game, the Miami Dolphins, in that stretch. So the 4 or 5 on the road are at Jacksonville, at Tennessee, home to Miami, at Houston, at Minnesota. So, again, I just think the schedule in general is really front-loaded. It's really quarterback-loaded. I think September is an interesting 4-game slate. I thought Mike Chappell, I believe, had this of like 3 or 4 at home for the first time in 35 years or something like that. And C.J. Stroud and Jordan Love, week 1 and week 2. I mean, that's quite the start. The Packers will be coming off that trip to Brazil, so they will have an extra day or two. And then you'll have Caleb Williams and the very pesky Steelers there to round out September. I don't need to remind anybody on the Colts' futility of week 1 games, 0-9-1 in openers. Since 2013, everybody in the NFL has won at least 2 of them. The Colts have not, so that is also something to note on that end.
The stretch that I said on Thursday on Korean Company, when they asked me for, Jimmy and Jake asked me for my thoughts on the schedule, I said that week 7 through week 12 was going to largely dictate if they're playoff bound or not, because you have Miami, Houston, Minnesota, Buffalo, New York Jets, and the Lions. And I said that because we know this franchise's history in terms of slow starts during the regular season. And if you are playing a bunch of teams right in that middle part of the year, and that's where injuries start to crop up, I should say, it could be a very, very fascinating win-loss outcome during that stretch, simply because we've already highlighted how easy the schedule is following week 12 against Detroit. You lose a couple games early in the season, like to Chicago or Pittsburgh, hell, even Tennessee, then those games, week 7 through week 12, become all more important. And if you go 1-5 or 2-4, then you are so contingent on coming out of the start of the season really strong and closing the season as well really well.
Yeah, you mentioned the slow starts, and obviously the week 1 drought stands out for itself. But you do bring up a good point. They've been a poor September team in general when you look at it. And that's where I see the Texans twice before Halloween. I'm like, wait, is that good or bad? Do you want Houston out of the gate? I know a lot of people have, gone off this. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge game. You want to play it. And I'm kind of like, well, is there going to be any Anthony Richardson rust and not playing football for whatever, 10, 11 months? Would you rather kind of, wait a little bit on that end? I do think that's a question that you have. I brought up Mother Nature earlier. Lambeau, for those going up there, that's great. Mid-September for that one. But again, you do have Foxborough, Denver, and New York all in the month of December.
Brutal.
Obviously, the 2 trips to MetLife, given the injury situation with that stadium, not ideal. Denver, the longest road trip all year long. Nothing in the Pacific time zone.
I believe the Colts are like the team that has the fewest miles traveled this year.
Right, and that's pretty par for the course, given they're in the middle of the United States. I think that's like and you don't play a game, obviously, in Frankfurt, and then you throw in the no Pacific time zone games. That's probably going to check out. Again, the road schedule is just pretty tame. Only 1 double-digit win team on the road out of your 9 road games. So I would say, again, the front-loaded quarterback and the front-loaded probably divisional slate. Houston, twice before Halloween, and you're done with AFC South road games before Halloween. I mean, you have the 3 AFC South road games in a 4-week stretch, and then you're done with that. That is also something that I took note of with this schedule.
Any other minor notes that caught your eye?
What am I seeing? 4 rookie quarterbacks potentially. You get Caleb Williams here in week 3, and then Bo Nix on the road, J.J. McCarthy on the road, Drake May on the road. That's really it. So, yeah, that stands out schedule. Again, I got something up, 1075thefan.com on that. And I know we got a decent amount of Twitter questions to get to, but before that, let's play that Will Hewlett interview. Again, this is the private quarterback coach to Anthony Richardson, the man he works with in the off seasons. Really enjoyed Will's, candor with us. This would have been last year, right before the draft, or right after the draft, I should say. We had him on and wanted to get a little update on him, or on Richardson. And so this was on our show a couple weeks back. Will Hewlett joined us and figured with Anthony Richardson starting up his 11-on-11 work this week. Let's get an update on the Colts quarterback and what he's been doing here over the past couple of months. Colts are back to work. Offseason program underway. Week 1 of that. We're still about a month away from OTAs beginning, and again, that will be the first opportunity for Anthony Richardson to get back on the field in some of these team-like settings in front of coaches, 7-on-7, 11-on-11, and we'll see just how much the activity looks like for him, but it does sound like there will be some participation here this spring, and a man that's worked with him extremely close over the last couple of off seasons. He is the quarterback coach for Anthony Richardson, courtesy of the QB Collective. You heard him on with us last year after the draft, and he joins us now. He is Will Hewlett. Will, good morning. Before we dive into Richardson's specific stuff, just a little bit of background, if you don't mind, for our listeners that might have missed last year. Certainly you've had work with some other former Colts quarterbacks, i.e. Gardner Minshew, but just a little bit of background on your work with Anthony and other quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sam Ellinger as well. I've been kind of in the private training sector, I guess you could say, for the past almost 20 years now. The couple of the clients we've had over the past couple of years, we had Brock Purdy the year prior to Anthony. We had Ian Book from Notre Dame the year prior to that. This year we had Caleb Williams, Jordan Travis, and a couple other guys. And then we work with a number of different NFL quarterbacks across the country, do the draft prep things, and so really kind of just serve as the off-season training coach for quarterbacks that are not with their team currently. So when they're getting ready for the regular season, they're usually doing it with some kind of training team and facility, and that's kind of my role.
Again, he is Will Hewlett, quarterback coach for Anthony Richardson. A little bit of background there from Will. Let's just start what's different. This time last year when we spoke with you, the stuff you were working on specifically exiting Florida versus now this year. Yes, it's just 173 snaps. Yes, it's coming off the injury. But what is different about what you've wanted to kind of instill and drill in him here in 2024 versus 2023?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Anthony, like all the rookies last year, he's not a rookie anymore. And regardless of the limited amount of play, I think he was able to get enough under his belt to really build a confidence. There was just kind of a certain aura about him this time coming back where, not that he ever could question that he would be able to do it before, but he went out there and he did it at a high level. And I think he was really excited by, some of the progress and things that he was able to do on the field. So this offseason, in spite of coming back from an injury, I think he was feeling pretty good about, where it was all going. Obviously there's going to be those question marks when you're coming back from some kind of a surgery, how things are going to work as you come back to your returning to throw. But yeah, I think, we're many steps forward than where we were last offseason. I think there was kind of a narrative out there coming out of Florida. Could the kid throw a ball that wouldn't hit the dirt? Who's inconsistent, and obviously that wasn't the case. And he worked extremely hard on perfecting his craft. And there's little things he had to tighten up. He had to get better at certain parts of the throwing game. But he really took to pay attention to the small details and made massive progress that past off season. So we really just picked back up where he left off from this past season, except for, maybe limited volume and controlled throwing because of the returning from the injury.
We're talking to Anthony Richardson, his quarterback coach, Will Hewlett, joining us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline on the Fan on this Thursday. If I could pin you down on, I don't know, if it would be a play, a game, or just a few plays that you watch Anthony last year. Again, we know before the injuries, and he had a couple of them last year, Will, but he still did get over 150 snaps. Was there anything, or what were the things, I guess I should say, when you watched him that rookie year, you said, yeah, that's it. He gets it. That's something we worked on. That's one reason he's going to be so good in the NFL.
Yeah, I think there was a couple moments. I think it was preseason game against the Bills. I believe he might have actually thrown a pick early, but then he just settled down and played ball, and he was able to complete little dink and dunk throws, move through progressions, make a couple runs. And he just kind of, went into a space that you're looking for quarterbacks to do, just get the flow of the game. And that was immediately like, okay, he's got this. Now it's a preseason game. Obviously, other games are, a little bit more, the regular season games are a little bit more intense. There was a game, I think it was, I believe there was a throw he made. It might have been against the Rams, but where he ripped a 35-yard seam ball. And the funny thing is it was a type of throw that, he made a couple of those that you were a little bit like, wow, that was really impressive. But when I talked to him about it in the off season, this current off season, what was interesting about it was it wasn't even in the progression. It was kind of one of those plays where he saw safety creeping. He gave his receiver the nod, and they were able to kind of go a little off schedule and hit a big gain for a touchdown. So stuff like that, when you're playing at that kind of level as a rookie, you got that kind of feel for the game. I just knew after talking to him this offseason and watching what I saw during the season that he's going to be a great one.
Yeah, that ball to Josh Downs in that Rams game, that was certainly...
Yeah. I'm watching it right now.
Yeah, that was arguably the best play he had all season. And hell, in that Rams game, he had another one with Aaron Donald draped on him that certainly stood out as well. Again, Will Hewlett is joining us here from the QB Collective. He is the quarterback coach for Anthony Richardson. We spoke with Will last year just after the draft. And Will, I remember then kind of the focus was, all right, Andy's my co-host here. He's certainly not Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson has got to understand the different velocities in throwing the ball under 20 yards, and it wasn't necessarily like you're only throwing a fastball. Don't do that. Do you feel like you've seen progression there in, again, understanding the different velocities needed for some of the shorter intermediate throws?
Oh, absolutely. I think, again, when you kind of bank a year of training, and you kind of really dig into how your throw works and start to feel things out and then play some ball, you just inch along and you move along the curve in terms of understanding that. And so he's got a level of intuitiveness in how he operates where I believe that area is already better. We were joking around because we were talking about some of Brock Purdy's throws over the middle that he makes where everyone kind of holds their breath. And he's like, I got to work on that part of my game. I'm not quite there yet. But, he's in terms of just base level consistency, being able to throttle his throw in terms of velocity and accuracy. It's better than it was last year.
Will we notice anything different motion-wise coming off the injury? Or I guess even just fundamentally footwork, base, anything like that?
I don't think you'll see anything differently up top. I think that's going to look relatively the same, which is kind of what we want. It's kind of a blessing, coming back from an injury. I think he's going to, we worked on a couple small things from in the lower body this offseason. Just building a consistency, playing maybe a little bit more relaxed up top, maybe the only difference. But, I think, the real focal point for Anthony now is just being able to kind of tie his feet to all the progressions, making sure that he's on time from the first read to the second read to the third read. And then, just getting that feel back of when that ball's going to come out and the kind of timing. And I think, rolling into OTAs and that kind of stuff, depending on what his involvement is in that, he'll knock some of the rust off through that. So I think he's in a really good space going into this next season.
Anthony Richardson's quarterback coach, Will Hewlett, joining us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Will, I might be wrong here, but I don't know. I mean, in your time doing this with quarterbacks, it felt like a number of years ago, guys would leave college, and it's like, okay, you need to conform to the NFL game. You're going to kind of shed your college football skin, and you're going to go to the NFL game, and you're going to conform to what they do. And then somewhere, I don't know if it was definitely within the last decade or so, I would say, Will, it's different, right? It's now, no, the NFL is going to conform to some of the things and some of the ideas that the college game is doing. Do you see it that way, and how has that changed your job?
Yeah, absolutely. I see it that way. I think there's still some systems that operate, with a more traditional quarterback, and by traditional, I mean kind of just drop back, run second, maybe not even run second. It's like pass first, pass second, pass third, then run. You got kind of the operator, the guy that's going to get you the right play. And then there's this evolution of a more dynamic, running quarterback. But I want to be careful by saying, like, I don't think Anthony should be lumped in a category of a guy that should run before he passes as well. Like, I do feel like, he's as good in the pocket as we've seen in terms of coming out of college in quite some time, with his ability to navigate through pressure. He just happens to be one of the freakiest athletes in the world. So it would be detriment to the Colts to not to be able to utilize him in the run game.
Sure.
Essentially, what that allows the Colts offense to do is the defense has to play. You can try and spy him. You can, that's probably not going to work. But they have to account for a six, runner, and but then he can also throw the heck out of the ball. So I think when coaches are dealing with the dynamic quarterbacks these days, they still have to be able to throw the ball effectively. Otherwise, it's kind of just a one-trick pony. So I believe that the evolution from college to more guys are just getting an opportunity. The offenses are kind of predicated around the quarterback being able to run in certain situations. And so from supply and demand, you've got more guys than ever that are able to run the ball. So the NFL better adapt in some capacity, and they have. Like Shane Steichen, I think, has done a phenomenal job blending a really creative style of offense with, run pass option plays, pure drop back, and then other ways to get Anthony in space. So you're seeing that in the league, and I think it's kind of here to stay.
Will, really enjoyed this combo. I appreciate your time, not only last year, kind of giving us a little bit of background on exactly where your focus was with Anthony Richardson, but now heading into year two. It's kind of funny how you mentioned him as a passer. That was the Chris Ballard big takeaway from last season. Yes, just 173 snaps, but if there's something Ballard said he came away maybe a little bit more impressed with, was that he feels like he can be a high-level passer in this league. So I found that interesting as well.
Yes, sir. No, absolutely. Well, I appreciate y'all having me on, and I'm real excited to watch the Colts compete this year and see how boy Anthony does. Big things in store for that man. He's gifted and just a great person, among other things. So it'd be fun to watch.
All right, thank you to Will Hewlett, again, quarterback coach for Anthony Richardson on that, and obviously very optimistic on what Richardson is doing, has been doing. I appreciate his insight. I feel like, he kind of tells you a couple of things about, you might notice a lower body tweak or two, be more relaxed in the upper body a little bit there, marrying kind of that feet to the progressions will be something to watch for. But yeah, just looking forward to seeing how much Richardson does, participate in OTAs and what these next couple of weeks look like. Because after this, nothing until training camp at Grand Park.
Yeah, that's right. From the limited amount of videos we've seen so far on social media, you can kind of see the difference a little bit already of what you just hinted at. And granted, yes, they're drills, and that's what he's going to be working on. But he looks more fluid with the way he throws the football, just from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and he's always been a really natural thrower of the football. I look at him and think, man, he looks like a shortstop in baseball, just with his natural throwing motion and everything like that. So I'll have a recap up on our website, and we'll talk about it next podcast from OTAs.
5 Twitter questions to get to on today's podcast. Are you ready for them?
I am ready.
We will start with Wake Spike. First of all, let me say you need to start in Eddie's Bet Pod because he hit both on the draft and the Pacers predictions.
Look at this. Now, did you have Leatu Latu as the pick? Did I miss that?
I had edge rusher.
I got it.
I had the wrong name. I had the right
Dallas
position.
Turner.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, you could have made a good amount of money if you would have thought Colts defensive line at the first pick.
Yeah, that's right. Secondly, after seeing the schedule and getting one primetime game, I was disappointed. This is Wake Spike speaking, not me, Eddie. But if the Colts won 4 of their first 5 games, do you think they would be flexed into more primetime games? If not that, what would it take?
They do earlier flexing, don't they now?
Now, last year was the first iteration, right, of the flex ability, and I don't think we saw many.
There weren't a lot. Yeah, there weren't a lot. Again, right now you have 2 dates to be determined, the final 2 games of the season. Giants, Jags. I mean, hell, Jags week 18. That could, seemingly be a flex option there. So, well, first off, I should say congrats to the Eddie Betts pod.
That's a great idea, by the way.
We're all about that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not too worried about primetime. I get that there are fans out there that like view it as level of respect and how much you earn it. I understand TV networks probably being a little bit hesitant to put the Colts in primetime until they see Anthony Richardson, healthier and playing more. So, yeah, if they get off to a good start and the quarterback is healthy, certainly I could see the Colts get into the flexible games early because, again, you've got good quarterback matchups.
Mm-hmm.
Opposite that. But, again, I'm just not one that overreacts too much to the national media and all of that. And I get, obviously the Pacers and Knicks, people are fired up about that. I don't know. I just think it's kind of wasted breath to whine and moan about that stuff. I'd rather talk about, what's happening in the games and all of that a little bit more. I've talked about this before. I think I've certainly carried the Colts water, and I thought rightfully so, in the lack of primetime games they got. Kind of that Andrew Luck era. I felt like they deserved more if you compare than the rest of the NFL, et cetera, et cetera. This season, I just kind of shrugged my shoulders. Maybe they deserved one more, but I understand why. The powers that be at those networks might be a little bit hesitant about committing to, those types of games. And I don't know, maybe you're still grounded from what happened with Colts Broncos on Thursday Night Football in 2022.
Oh, God.
I mean, that year the Colts got a lot in primetime.
Yeah.
You had the Chargers in primetime. You had the Steelers at home in primetime. You
Cardinals.
Had Dallas on a Sunday night football game. Cardinals was
prime time. It was
that was a Christmas game during COVID, though. That was a couple years before.
Gosh, my time is really getting messed up. Yeah.
I'm talking Matt Ryan season.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Not Carson Wentz season.
They just all blur together anymore. I don't know how you do it sometimes.
Very understandably. So, yeah, I'm not going to fret too much over the maybe some, would have preferred another 4:00 game. I could probably hear you out on that, but yeah, nothing too big.
I'm sure you're thrilled just to the one primetime game because that means you get to go to bed at a reasonable hour and you don't have to be up so late.
Selfishly, very, very happy about that. Yes. Yeah. The total selfish answer on that. And again, I know there's some people that would feel that way as well, just working earlier in the mornings. Someone pointed this out to me, 3 of 4 in September. That's great for tailgating weather.
That's also true.
So, hey, for the hometown crew, very good on that end.
Brian's Twitter question is up next. Pacers advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. Star players brought in free agency. I'd like to hear the Colts mantra on they are available for a reason. Take a note, Ballard. I'll hang up and listen. No talk of locker rooms for Kevin Pritchard.
Shout out to Kevin Pritchard. That was pretty cool to see his emotion in the
that was great.
In the bowels of Madison Square Garden. Pacers did a great job of throwing that onto their social media from yesterday and celebrating that win. Obviously, Eddie, when we're in this market and like this is the job that we're doing, it's extremely natural to compare the Pacers and the Colts. There's only 2 professional sports teams of the major version here in town, so you oftentimes get that. I've thought oddly that both Kevin Pritchard and Chris Ballard kind of held on to their previous blueprint a little bit too long. And you know what? It takes a lot to admit that you're wrong. I mean, that is, I think that goes without saying in life. Yeah, it takes a lot for people to admit that, and my hand is certainly raised in that. And think about it, especially from a work standpoint. Like Eddie, you, me, we don't want to admit that we are wrong because then our bosses are going to look like that and be like, wait, you're wrong? Wait, what?
Yeah.
Didn't I hire you for a reason?
Mm-hmm.
I hired you not to be wrong. So
that's why I should start the Eddie Betts podcast with Kevin.
So, if you're Kevin Pritchard and you give up on your blueprint or you decide to do something else, Herb Simon's going to be like, wait, what? And if you're Chris Ballard and you give up on that, Jim Irsay's going to be like, wait a minute, what's going on here? For Kevin Pritchard, it was, realizing or admitting that, forcing two bigs was not going to work. And you were a bit of a brittled bunch with Malcolm Brogdon and company. And for Chris Ballard, it was the Band-Aid quarterback isn't going to work. Now, again, I thought Kevin might have held on, if I'm nitpicking, maybe like a year too long. But then he obviously made a huge trade with Domantas Sabonis for Tyrese Halliburton, and the rest is history off of that. And then, Ballard, I would say, has hung on way too long.
Oh, yeah.
With the Band-Aid quarterback to it. Now, I do think it's easier to turn it around in the NBA. I know some would say, well, if you have a quarterback, you're going to get it right in the NFL. Sure. But what helps you in the NBA is the access to the trades.
Mm-hmm.
The NFL, you just don't see anything like it. The NFL does not offer trades, many if at all, where there's no Sabonis for Halliburton type trade sitting there readily available in the NFL. It's so much more of a draft commitment there to that. So, and that's, I think, the difficulty that a lot of these GMs are into. And some obviously don't even get a crack at, getting a second chance to implement a new blueprint, et cetera, et cetera.
Colton's question is up next. Do you think the Colts can be legitimate contenders going into the 2025 season? Other than questions at defensive back, we have a pretty complete roster with young guys at premium positions who just need to develop. We also don't have a ton of guys we need to re-sign next year either.
Thank you, Colton, for the question. I would say, well, first, I guess let's start here. What would you define as legit contenders? Is it a playoff team? Yeah, I think they definitely should be in the thick of that sort of race. I think this about the Colts, and I think we got an AFC South specific question about it last week, and I'll go here as the AFC as a whole. I just think there's more volatility with the Colts than most teams out there, which is weird to say about a team bringing back 22 starters. A team bringing back 22 starters, you expect them to be pretty even keel. But I just think Richardson kind of offers a wide range of things that can happen. So, so much of it to me comes back to do you have enough at those elite spots? And I don't think the franchise has had that here in recent years. And you're going to need some internal development at some of those key spots, especially edge rusher here. So it would be definitely a disappointing season, I think, if the Colts are on the outside looking in, playoff-wise. I still am probably and I know the Pacers are kind of debunking this right now, but for the most part, I do think there's kind of a stepladder to playoff success. And so I look at the Colts situation and think it's a little bit of kind of like get your toes in the water first before really being like when I hear contender, I think of championship contender.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not there, but playoff type of contender, sure. And the beauty about the NFL is, the Lions are probably an example of it last year. Of it's not like a one and done nature to a playoff format induces a ton of it's the ones and twos every year in the NFC and AFC title game. The one and done nature to it allows for a little bit of upset. And, we've obviously had a history of wildcard teams making runs like that. So that is the beauty of how the playoff format works. But again, 7 to 16 teams make the playoffs from each conference. That's a big percentage.
Mm-hmm.
It's time, and the Colts should be, in that mix for sure.
One thing it just made me think of when you were talking about just like weapons and things like that in like the secondary with the question from Colton, it's getting tested immediately in the season with Houston, Green Bay, and Chicago because all three of those teams have legit guys. Now, with Green Bay, you may not know their names, but they just know how to use their guys with Matt LaFleur in the right scheme and in the right spots to get going. I mean, people forget that offense of the Packers, they were humming the last half of the season last year and into the postseason. They scored, 52 points on the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs?
Yeah, and again, they're going to come off the Brazil game, so they'll have a little bit of extra time for their home opener with that. But that I think is, again, what is interesting to me about the September slate. Part of me looks at 3 or 4 at home and thinks that's a great opportunity. But then I also think those are some pretty good football teams and some pretty good quarterbacks. So how the Colts handle that, I think it'll be fascinating.
2 Twitter questions left. Cameron asks, is the succession plan for Kalen Jackson and Carly Irsay to own and run the Indianapolis Colts when Jim Irsay is gone? I know they are currently involved and have been for a while. Do we feel good about that if so?
Yeah, obviously this is a question we got a lot, kind of a couple months back when Jim Irsay's illness was, rumors are kind of running rampant on that end.
Have you heard anything about him recently, by the way?
No, and this is a time where it is supposed, I do think the NFL has their spring meetings, I think pretty soon here, maybe even this week or the end of this week. They aren't as popular as the league's annual meetings back in March. But no, I have not, outside of what we heard his voice on the draft call there when he FaceTime with Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard. This is the time of year, Eddie, though, that it's usually very Jim Irsay quiet. Really after the draft, we don't usually see or hear from him till training camp. So that's kind of where we're at, I guess, on that front. I've always been extremely impressed with Kalen Jackson. Again, Kalen Irsay, the youngest of the 3 daughters, took her husband's last name. I mean, her presence, I think she's got such a great balance of the NFL side of it, but just kind of gets it, I think, from a public standpoint. And yeah, I've always been very struck by her, and I think she'd be kind of a great spokesperson isn't the right word, but kind of carry that torch moving forward. The NFL, if I'm not mistaken, requires a succession plan to be on file for the league, no matter what. And, if you go back to, I think it was 2011, maybe 2012, the Colts threw the vice chair / owner label on all 3 daughters. Carly, the oldest, Casey Foyt, the middle one, who's not, very involved, and then Kalen as the youngest. And, in talking to kind of some sports legal people about that, someone was saying that can kind of help offset some of that inheritance tax as you pass that down moving forward. So, was that a little bit of a handshake agreement with Jim and the daughter saying, hey, let's do this now. Dad's still going to run the team, but this is something that we can, kind of help the financial burden a little bit down the road on that. So, anytime you got multiple children in any sort of situation, any sort of family business, I don't need to remind probably anybody out there, it can get a bit messy, but they all seem pretty close. And, I would like to think it would be as seamless as it can be.
Final question. Are we going with Aussie?
Let's go OC, right? Giants DN, Umenyiora.
Oh, yeah.
Little flashback there.
Yeah.
Gosh, I almost butchered that last name now that I was thinking about it.
Why is it that when I tell the Colts fans 12 wins or bust, I get met with so much skepticism? Our schedule is pretty easy, and the biggest threat to our division is a second-year starter and Stephon Diggs. If Chris Ballard thinks he can win a Super Bowl with Gus Bradley, then 12 games should be easy.
High expectations here. What is the over-under on Colts wins? Do you know?
Let me look.
God, and my other question would be, when's the last time the Colts won 12 games in a season? I mean, it's got to be what, Manning?
They didn't win 12 with luck, did they?
No, a lot of 11s. I think 3 straight years of them. Not mistaken. I think in the AFC South you don't have as many free spaces as you used to. I think let's start there. And just in general, I mean, again, the double-digit wins Twice in the last day. Is the schedule easy? I don't view it as easy.
8.5.
That's the over-under wins?
Uh-huh.
Interesting. I don't view the schedule as a joke. I mean, I guess, maybe you don't have the Chiefs on there, or, if you're going to play divisions in the NFC. I don't know. I tend to think the NFC North's actually got a little bit of depth and substance to it than some of the other ones. So I just don't view it as easy. I also think a team that people are forgetting about, and they're acting like they're just back to being the same old, is Jacksonville. It's like everyone. I mean, if you look at it last year, and Eddie, you follow it pretty closely, they literally were good to very good with Christian Kirk, and then without him, they were bad. I mean, that can kind of boil the schedule down if you look at the win-loss record, the how many points they scored. And I mean, hell, before laying an egg in Week 18, they could have been, representing the AFC South as a division champ. So, yeah, I mean, 12 wins. I guess you got an extra game on the schedule, and I know the road aspect of it isn't too daunting, but 8.5 seems a hair low. I'd probably set it at 9.5 with that. Boy, it's just crazy how one game can mean so much in an NFL season.
2009, the last time they won 12 games, and they won 14 that year. It was the year they started 14-0 and lost the last 2 games.
So 15 years since they won a dozen or more games.
AKA the year they lost to the Saints in the Super Bowl.
Sure. Yeah, I don't really follow the whole Gus Bradley thing. If Ballard thinks he can win a Super Bowl with Gus Bradley, then 12 games should be easy. I don't know if I totally follow that aspect to it. And I think it's kind of a slap in the face just to be like, well, the biggest threat in the division is a second-year starter. I mean, C.J. Stroud is a pretty good player in football, and if you need to remind yourself, just go back and watch the season finale. So, do I think the Colts can hover right around double-digit wins and be in the playoff mix? Certainly, but I don't know. 12 is just a hair rich for me.
If you had to peg a couple games, it's like, yeah, they could win, and it wouldn't shock me. Which games are those?
In terms of games, they'll be labeled as
underdogs, and there's there's no way they can win this game.
Well, again, I guess a lot of this is what do you consider the hardest game on the schedule? Is it at Houston? Because the 2 AFC East teams that are the best, you get both of them at home. When you think about it, okay, so you play the AFC East and the NFC North, right? Who are the 2 best teams in the AFC East?
Oh boy, Buffalo.
I think it's pretty obvious. Buffalo, and then...
I mean, by Vegas' terms, it would be New York.
Okay, well, let's just say Miami for argument's sake.
Yeah.
And I know Vegas is high enough. Okay, NFC North, 2 best teams.
NFC North? Detroit and Green Bay?
So
although I'm not as low on Minnesota as a lot of people are.
Right. But if you just play that out, how you just laid it out, you play the AFC East, you play the NFC North. The 2 best teams in each of those divisions, those are your home games. You go on the... Well, actually, do you go on the road to... You go to Green Bay, don't you?
Go to Green Bay, go to Minnesota.
Stand corrected. 3 of the 4 you have at home. I mean, that's nice, I think, on that end. I don't know, Lambeau in mid-September doesn't seem as daunting as Lambeau in mid-December, something along those lines. So I do think that is a favorable aspect to it. So much of it, again, is just going to be how ready are you? On paper, a team that returns all 3 of their coordinators, their play caller, and 22 starters, you should be built to start the year off very, very well.
Yep.
Where's Richardson at from a Russ standpoint? Is there any there? Because if not, you can really take advantage of it. And if you don't take advantage of it, you're obviously going to have to really, take advantage of the back end of the schedule.
All right, 2 things as we round out the podcast. First, what are you looking for at OTAs? Second, Pacers, Celtics.
Yeah, OTA
prediction.
Front. I mean, Richardson's the obvious one. Where are we at? Position battles at the safety spot next to Julian Blackmon. Where are you at corner-wise? Is Juju Brents a locked-in starter?
How does Adonai Mitchell look against
Definitely
NFL corners?
Definitely. Where's the health of a guy like Dallas Flowers coming off the Achilles? Defensive line rotation. Again, it's probably a little early for that, but those are some of the things that I'll definitely be focused on. Pacers, Celtics. Oh, man. You can tell I spent a weekend in Vegas. I'm shocked the game one line is 9.5 points. I'd take the Pacers in points all day with that.
You think so?
9.5?
Boston's rested. Pacers coming off a blowout win.
Yeah, but I know where that. I know that thought, but part of me is kind of like, is this the wild card team that just had a game? The NFL wild card team that maybe is now hot. Well, what does Game 7 do for the Pacers?
Boston has won each of the first 2 games, and they've laid an egg in Game 2 in each series so far.
Yeah. Well, is Jason Tatum going to get hurt? Which Celtic star is going to get hurt?
Yeah, no kidding.
That's seriously where we're at.
They should just rest both of those guys so they don't suffer any career-ending injury potentially, right?
Porzingis is out. I'll go Celtics in 6.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Right there with you. The Pacers need McConnell and Shepard and Toppin to continue playing. I think they need to be consistent with how the energy they bring off the bench and the productivity that they get from those 3 players, because Boston is really reliant on those 5 in the rotation outside of Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser.
Right. They obviously don't really commit to the bench. They just, subset a couple of those starters with the bench unit. Yeah, I do think on paper, especially until Porzingis gets back, Siakam and Turner, there should be an advantage there.
Yeah.
Who guards Siakam and who guards Turner? I mean, there's been points, I think, when these Boston matchups. Now, these 2 teams haven't played in 4 months, so we should probably preface that. But, Derek White has guarded Turner. Or, Drew Holiday has guarded, they have put a guard on Turner. Do they look at it and almost say, hey, we don't think Turner's going to post up. Let's put Horford on Siakam, and then let's put, whoever on Turner. I do think that is a potential matchup to watch. But certainly Aaron Nesmith, how he looked in Game 7 will be vital. He was so good in Game 7.
I thought an underrated player in that game was Andrew Nembhard.
Yeah, he was too.
I don't think he'll get enough love that he should, because Tyrese was phenomenal, Siakam was phenomenal, but each time the Knicks made a run to cut it down, he had the basket.
Yeah,
they cut it to 6. He had the layup and took the MSG crowd out of it, and then the Pacers went on a run and pushed it right back up to double digits.
And I think that's really well said. I also would I think I'm reminded of this. Don't forget about Game 3. I mean, we will exit this series and it will largely be remembered for the Pacers' historic offensive output in Game 7 and the Knicks' injuries. And you'll forget Game 3.
Oh, yeah.
Of the Pacers down 2-0. Turner gets a big block. Nembhard hits the 3 from, Kokomo. And
you get the DiVincenzo goaltend.
And that's it. I mean, you go down 3-0, it's probably over. Just psyche-wise. It is probably over more than anything. But the Pacers outlast New York in 7. He is Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week. Indianapolis 500. Fingers crossed, Mother Nature. We'll talk to you next week, recapping some OTAs.